The early 2000s were kind of a weird time. The internet was becoming a more prevalent part of people's lives, and it was definitely accessible, but it wasn't quite integrated into our everyday schedules in a way it is now. Because of this, monthly magazines that would keep you up to date on all the newest tech and games, such as Nintendo Power for instance, were still a viable source of information to learn about all the cool new stuff coming out. Which brings us to myself back in 2006. Back in middle school, I loved the Pokemon series. And when Pokemon Diamond and Pearl were in development, the place I first heard about it was, you guessed it, Nintendo Power. I didn't own Gen 1, but I did own Gen 2, and I borrowed Gen 3 from my friends every now and then. Gen 3 was cool, but Gen 2 was my absolute favorite. The amount of features they improved on and added within the very first sequel was impressive. Genders, breeding, new stats like special attack and defense, night and day cycle, special weekly events, the ability to rebattle trainers. Again, Gen 3 was cool, but not nearly as ambitious as Gen 2. I mean, that game ran on a console that couldn't even display color. So to say it was pushing the capabilities of the hardware is an understatement. Nintendo Power emphasized all the cool new features we'd be seeing in Diamond and Pearl, including several things that were in Gen 2, but excluded for whatever reason in Gen 3. I would say this alone hyped me up for Diamond and Pearl. I mean, check this out. When Pokemon Gold and Silver introduced a real-time clock, Pokemon fans absolutely loved it. It seemed destined to become a staple of the Pokemon games. But when Ruby and Sapphire came around, the feature disappeared. Now the time has come again. Pokemon Diamond and Pearl reintroduced the system in a big way. Holy crap, I said to myself. This is going to be the one. This will be the most expansive Pokemon game to date. I mean, just listen to the way they worded that. It's like Nintendo Power themselves were like, hey, you know how you were expecting more out of Gen 3? Well, don't you worry, because Gen 4 has you covered. Dude, I was so excited for that crap, I straight up bought the newly released DS Lite so I could play this amazing Pokemon experience on a console that wasn't falling apart. Yeah, the original DS wasn't as well built as it may look. In fact, I think the Lite was more durable. Keep in mind, I didn't have a lot of money or anything. I was a poor kid. The money I spent on the Lite and Pokemon Diamond was basically all the money I had at the time. I was just that confident in the new Pokemon. Oh boy, did that excitement turn around fast. Gen 4 takes a little bit from each of the previous gens, definitely giving it a lot of content in terms of a checklist, but none of it feels nearly as fleshed out as the games they were introduced in. The time thing, for example. While certain Pokemon can only be found during certain times of the day, it isn't nearly as prominent as a gimmick as it was in Gen 2, where you would find specific time-locked Pokemon in the very first area of that game. Anyway, I could go on and on about this stuff, but the bottom line is that while my opinion on Gen 4 has eased up over time, and at the very least, I think these Pokemon games deserve to be remade more so than any other gen. At the time, I was very disappointed. I mean, I guess that's just what happens when you read Nintendo propaganda trying to sell you stuff. Around this time, my friends and I would trade our DS games between each other. I of course lent my friend Pokemon, and in exchange he lent me games like Sonic Rush and Yoshi Touch and Go. Sonic Rush is one of those games you beat and then you're just done with. Yoshi Touch and Go, on the other hand, is sort of an endless game. You don't really beat it. So I held on to Yoshi for a long time because it's a very replayable game. And my buddy held on to Pokemon for a long time since, well, it's Pokemon and there's a decent amount to do until you've made a self-declaration that you've quote-unquote beat it. We had each other's games for such a long time, we were eventually just like,
hey, you wanna just trade games?
Despite Yoshi Touch and Go being a shallow game with the depth of a Flash game, I said yes. Really, I was so disappointed with Pokemon Diamond as a kid. I literally traded it for Yoshi Touch and Go. In hindsight, I probably got ripped off, especially of how much Pokemon games go for these days. Nonetheless, at that moment in time, I was content with the trade I made. It's not like I was going to play Pokemon anyway, I told myself. And you know what? I straight up didn't until I was a college student years later and picked up Pokemon X. What about this other game though? What was it about Yoshi Touch and Go that made me think it was worth trading Pokemon Diamond for? I think it's only fair to start off by saying Yoshi Touch and Go is a product of what I like to call the iPhone era of the DS. What does that mean? Well, back when the DS first came out, Nintendo wasn't really confident in the hardware. I mean, initially they were just saying the DS was an alternative to the Game Boy Advance, opposed to the upgrade it clearly was. Because of that, a lot of the early titles on DS were almost like tech demos. cheap bargain bin games that capitalize on the new features of the console, but were fairly shallow all things considered. We're talking games like Pack Pix, Feel the Magic, Pokemon Dash, and of course this game, hence my own denotation of the iPhone era. Much like iPhone games, they were just quick pick up and play games. They were not built around the grand sense of adventure you usually expect from Nintendo, just games they expect you to play for 10 to 20 minutes at a time. In fact, I should probably mention that Yoshi Touch and Go started its life as a tech demo called Balloon Trip, which was shown off at E3 2004. The demo had such good reception, Nintendo basically said F it and turned it into a retail game you had to pay $30 for. I mean, that was still $10 cheaper than the other games at the time, like Mario 64 DS, but $30 is still a lot of money for something like this. Was it worth it? No, but hey, let's see what we got. When you boot up the game, it brings you straight to the menu. No cutscene or anything. In fact, Yoshi Touch and Go doesn't even have a story. Or at least not in game anyway. There's a whopping 1 pages of story in the instruction manual, but all that really does is recap the premise of Yoshi's Island. A stork is carrying the babies, Kamek knocks the babies out of the stork's bill, Baby Mario ends up landing on Yoshi's back, and it's up to Yoshi to reunite the babies. Yep, that's all you get. There's not even a story mode. The 2 modes you can actually beat aren't even the main modes either. Let's talk basics. All of the game modes are separated into 2 sections. The first section sees you guiding a descending Baby Mario to safety. You use a touchscreen to draw rows of clouds that will reroute Baby Mario to avoid a variety of enemies. You can also use the touchscreen to circle enemies encasing them into a bubble, which in turn will convert them to coins. Coins will add to a score count, and the higher your score count, the better a Yoshi you will get when you start the second half. A Yoshi's tier is determined by its color. For example, a light blue Yoshi can carry a maximum of 25 eggs, while the red Yoshi can carry 45, which brings us to gameplay style 2. After the Sky segment, you play a ground segment with Yoshi. Just like the Sky segment, all the controls are done with the touchscreen. Yoshi will always automatically move on his own. You can throw eggs by tapping anywhere on the screen, you can jump by tapping Yoshi, once again you can encase enemies in bubbles by drawing circles, and of course you can still draw rows of clouds for Yoshi to walk on. There is no input for getting Yoshi to use his tongue though. The only time Yoshi will use his tongue in this game is when he eats fruit, and that's automatic. I don't know, isn't having a Yoshi game without a tongue button like having a Kirby game where you can't inhale? Wait a second. Eating fruit will give you more eggs, and if you get a total of 100 points, Baby Mario will grow a cape and go bonkers. You will have an infinite number of stars to throw during this time. A pretty neat perk, but Mario's speed can be a death sentence. Speaking of death, get ready to see that a lot. Any single hit from anything, and Yoshi drops down dead. When you play a game where everything is one-hit death, and said hit can mean the end of a 20-minute run, it makes it extremely apparent how unfair the game can be when you don't have direct control over the character. Instead of making a suitable amount of content, they try to stretch out everything I just described to you into 5 game modes. So there's Score Attack, where you have to get the highest score before you reach the goal. Time Attack, where you have to get to the end and save Luigi as fast as possible. This is also easily the worst mode because a timed challenge mode in a game where the player character moves on their own is one of the dumbest ideas I've ever heard of. Then there's the Marathon mode, which is essentially the meat of the game. In this mode, you just try to carry Baby Mario as far as you can, essentially making this one of the earliest Infinite Runners before Infinite Runner was even a prominent genre. It's not bad. This was the mode I would play over and over again when I was younger. Every 1,000 yards, you get a new colored Yoshi with a larger egg capacity and a higher movement speed, and every 500 yards, the level theme changes to add some variety. Caves with tons of walls, windy vistas that blow your clouds away. It's not much, but it's enough to make this type of game feel interesting. Rarely when you die does it feel justified, but it always keeps you coming back for more, so it's clearly doing something right. The last single player mode is Challenge mode. This is essentially Marathon mode without ever passing off Baby Mario or changing themes. In other words, this is Marathon mode without all the stuff that makes it interesting. There's rarely land to walk on, and the screen is clustered with a ton of spike dudes. That's essentially the big distinguisher. It's still better than Time or Score Attack, but you'd rather play the basic Marathon mode. The final mode, Versus, is as the name would insinuate, 2-player only. The multiplayer is a first person to the finish line sort of thing. If you consecutively hit multiple enemies with the same egg, you will send a bunch of spike dudes to the other player to hopefully slow them down. Also, don't mind the footage on the screen. Yoshi Touch and Go doesn't support dual cartridge play, only download play. And for those who are unfamiliar, it's near impossible to get download play to work right most of the time on DS emulators, so I just had to record a DS off screen while trying to play 2 consoles at once. But yeah, that's Yoshi Touch and Go, a $5 game at best, marked up as a full retail price entry because digital downloads on Nintendo handhelds didn't exist yet. Did I make the right choice trading Pokemon Diamond for it? In retrospect, no. But at the time, I think yes. Obviously, Pokemon Gen 4 is the game that people remember now, but that doesn't mean Yoshi is bad. The marathon mode is decently fun, and if you don't view it through the context of a full-priced retail game, but instead just view it as, well, a game, then it's not bad. Anyways, yeah, that's, yep, Yoshi Touch and Go.
Fish Vince, I'm going to need you to give me another outro here.
Blah, 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 blah. You ever just record your outro at 3 in the morning? Because that's where I'm at right now. Anyways, special thanks to patrons such as David Pacheco, John Hancock, Amanda Guth, Rami Batter, Chan Kopp, Daniel Rotwind, Jeffrey P. Long, Oliver Larkosh, Cashnader, Praetorian Mars, and Abby Knudsen. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, have a good one.
Yoshi. Yoshi.